All right. So this is I want to start by talking about the risk management. And how many of you, raise your hands, are familiar with this thing called the Swiss cheese hazard model? I'm not seeing very many hands, and I've had to go off gallery view to do this. But this is a diagram that I have seen many, many times in doing safety communications. And it's all about how do you limit hazards. And the image is like a set of slices of Swiss cheese. And if you line up all the holes in the Swiss cheese, you know, they vary from slice to slice. And the point is that every barrier that we put up to manage risks or manage safety or manage hazards or manage quality or anything is going to be fallible. But if you put up multiple barriers, they cancel each other out. So where there's a hole in one slice, there's not a hole in the next slice. And you can see in this particular diagram, the upper line only cuts through the first two slices and then it runs into a barrier. The bottom line manages to get through all four slices. And so the idea is to put enough barriers in place to make sure that where one fails, another backs it up. Does that all make sense? So what I wanted to say is, what things did you have in place that have helped you get through this? And I'll talk a little bit about my experience and then open it up to discussion and take and stop screen sharing. The things that I had in place, I have multiple clients, and that's a good thing. And I have a pretty decent setup in terms of my home office and the technology that I have that enables me to work remotely. I have one of my clients, I have their computer, and so I'm able to log in. And the other clients, you know, they're using technology that I'm able to log in. And several of my projects are things that come up every year and have to be done. Like one of them is a sustainability report. So those are things that I had in place. And I also have sort of a sense of working under pressure that I really honed after the flood. And so I really don't feel like I've been slowed down very much. And so I am going to stop sharing. Thanks. What else? Who else feels like they had done something that, whether that it was planned or not, really prepared them? I see Austin.
Working in the energy space, we definitely do a lot of planning for crisis scenarios. And, you know, we drill for offshore, loss of containment, fatalities, terrorism. Pandemics is completely new. And so, you know, we follow the ICS structure, which is the incident command structure for those that aren't familiar. But this was completely different. When an IMT was stood up for us, so I was responding as the public information officer for the Gulf of Mexico business, it was a little bit different. Generally, if there is an incident, you just have one business unit responding. For this, we had every single business in the company set up an IMT. We had multiple country support teams, multiple business support teams. And so I think it was just a little bit of a challenge early on for us to work together and communicate with all of those different structures, because, you know, what we're communicating in Houston might be different than Alaska because they have different state regulations going on. And so I think that was a little bit of a challenge for us early on. So I think that's sort of a lesson learned from our end, is that pre-planning is critical. And then how do you streamline communications with so many different employees spread out throughout the world. You know, for example, we're approaching 10 years on Deepwater Horizon. For that, it was the Gulf Coast that was affected. So you knew who your stakeholders were, you knew who the people that were impacted. But for this, it's literally every single person on the planet that is impacted, every single employee that we have. And so how do we communicate that message and, you know, kind of convey a sense of empathy and support while doing that as well. So I think that's kind of been the challenge and my takeaway from this whole experience.
What about others of you who have clients that either were prepared or not? I see Trisha's hand up.
Yeah, so as you know, we're staffing and recruiting firms, so we have many different clients in many different industries, from oil and gas to retail to high tech and so forth. And so each one of those industries, each one of those client companies has had their own guidelines, and some of them closed their office space a little bit earlier than others. And some have, if it's manufacturing plant, then the communicators and the marketers aren't going in, but the person that we have that's actually responsible for the logistics piece of the parts to assemble the computers has to go in at a certain time. And so it's been a lot of work for my boss. Thankfully, that's not my job. I'm just business development, so I'm an individual contributor. But Debbie has been managing people across the board. And thankfully, she's managed hundreds and hundreds of people in her day, so she's got this down pat, and it's not a problem for her. But it's been, in my opinion, a big challenge because of so many different companies. And we do have people not just in Houston, we have people sitting at places across the United States because our companies are across the states and the globe. So it's been a unique experience in the different messaging that we're getting and having to distribute to the various people with depending on which company they're in.
Great, thanks. Other comments on being prepared or not? Well, actually, I want to kind of move to the or not. Like, what's the biggest thing that you realized you didn't have in place? I'll tell you mine. Mine is savings. Like, not in the stock market. So, or mutual funds, you know, all of those. Cash on hand, that's my big issue. So I'm very fortunate that my business didn't dry up as quickly as I thought it might.
I'd like to say something about that because I've had an unexpected problem with collections. I invoiced my biggest client at the end of February, and normally that client pays right at 30 days. And so I wasn't worried. I just figured, okay, and I was watching my cash flow and everything. And March 27th came and went, and then April, and I've called them and I've emailed them and I've done everything possible to get this out of the mire. And I haven't been paid yet. So
yeah, that's a challenge you don't expect. What else?
I think one of the things, you know, I remember Phil Morabito several years ago talking about how, as an entrepreneur, he focused. Everything was very focused, and that's the way to, you know, grow the business. And I was that way. I mean, I offered instructional design and instructor-led training, and very focused. This is what I do. The types of courses are very focused on communication. And that was actually a deficit, you know, when all of this, it's hard to pivot when you're focused, you know, when you're that focused. On the other hand, having my foot injured back in the fall actually helped this situation. So, you know, different little things, like I had, you know, some money, cash at my house that I couldn't go to the ATM. So I had kind of that, and just weird stuff where, you know, that prepared for, you know, what came. I think the hardest part for me is being an extrovert and not having engagement. So, and this is great for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. What else? Prepared or not prepared?
Yeah, it's food, which is really interesting because we usually have about 2 weeks supply, but we have found that we have to order food a week, you know, like we have enough supply, but like when you go to the grocery store a week later, you have to order a week earlier. and figure out what you need and what will go away. And it's like, that's kind of a new way of planning, because you have to estimate, you know, what's going to happen. And then when you go, because I just go to the store and pick it up. They have it, they just bring it out and stick it in the back, because I don't want any contact. And so then you find out that you don't get half your food, you know, so then it's like, whoa, you have to kind of make do, which, you know, as Americans in this land of plenty, which is not that anymore, it's a different thing. So that's been, and also focus, like Beth was, did you hear Beth? That was before she cut out, she said focus, because of all the things that are happening every day on the news, which you kind of have to keep up with, you know, in order to figure out what you're going to do with your life at that moment. So that's been difficult, focusing.
That's interesting. One of the things I've been thinking about is the fact that we're so used to a 3-day news cycle, a 24-hour, but 3-day, as in the event happens, it's big news, and 3 days later it's not. And this is not going away. It just keeps being the news. And it's like after 9/11, when it was the news for so long. So, Pam, I think, had her hand up.
Well, mine had to do with my client, which is in Houston. And many of you might know that I do seminars for a family law attorney. And we do 4 seminars a year, and I kind of stay on this side of his business. He's got a law firm, but I just mostly deal with the seminar. Well, because we're at ground zero up here in Washington State, and you know, I immediately kind of had this gut reaction, kind of just based on my 25, 30 years of emergency response, that this was going to affect my April seminar in Houston with my client. Well, he was very busy because the pandemic affected the law firm side of the business in a kind of unusual way that I wasn't prepared for and he wasn't, in that all the schools began closing, and people that had court-ordered child possession schedules in place, it kind of blew those up. So think about it. If you're a divorced husband and wife and you have a schedule for picking up your children at school and doing the trade-offs on the weekends, and then people started having to be at home, and he was going through a huge, you know, mayhem. I mean, people were coming into his office, they wanted to change their court orders, and then the Texas Supreme Court issued orders saying, no, you got to stick what's in your divorce decree. And it's like, well, reality doesn't match the divorce decree anymore. So he had his hands completely full with that. So on March 13th, I had to send him this, you know, it was a Friday evening, and I sent him this email and said, Trey, we're going to have to cancel our April 25th seminar. And I think it just like blew his mind. He wasn't even thinking about any of this. And I said, listen, I'm at ground zero up here, and I know it's coming your way. So we just need to do it now and save our advertising money, because, you know, there's not going to be a seminar. And it took him the whole weekend to wrap his head around that whole concept. But I just found that years of experience, we all have done this, being in emergency response, our instincts kind of kick in, and we can see things before other people might be able to see them. And so thankfully that helped me in this case. But then I also saw where I had to step in and help him with a law firm come up with emergency response statements, that his firm was going to be open, they were going to teleconference, and so it kicked in a whole area that really I had to step in for my client and kind of teach him how to be in an emergency response mode and what those communications would look like. And we're still doing that, you know, because divorces the court system has kind of screeched to a halt, but now they're doing some electronic, you know, cases and their filings. And so anyway, it's kind of opened a whole new area for him. And it was kind of wild to see that kind of take place. But, you know, lots of things develop that you don't really plan on, like say you're in a lockdown situation with your spouse and they're abusive. There's a lot of cases where this has been a big problem with spousal abuse and child abuse being a huge issue. You can't get away from this abuser. And so we've had to issue blogs and social media around that topic, that if you need help, call this hotline, you know, and get away from your abuser. And which, you know, where do they go?
I'm the type, I have to have a list of things to do, keeps me focused. And because of this writing and editing project I've been working on, my life really hasn't changed. I've had enough work to keep me busy. But after next week, that's going to change. So I've made a list of things I can do during this downtime, and this might be something y'all could do too. I have tons of pictures, family pictures over the years, and I've tried to make yearly books, hardcover books with my pictures. So one of my goals is I've got 6 years of photos. I did my first one and it's a coffee table book with all the pictures of the year.
Oh,
so
cool.
That's my goal during this downtime, is to finally get all those pictures that are on my laptop into a book and save them.
I know someone that's on their stomach intubated right now, who is was before this in very good health and has been intubated for 4 days now, and things are not looking good. And I have an 18-year-old niece who got this and is slowly recovering. And my sister-in-law has 3 members of her husband's family, one of whom is 82 years old, who has this, and things are not looking well for 2 of those 3 people. So the fact that this can be spread so easily, I'm just, everybody needs to just be aware of that. That's why things are shut down, and that there is no vaccine. That's why things are shut down. So that's the end of my editorial piece on that. The other thing that I would like to say is that, Ben, I'm right there with you. It has been very depressing, and I'm not alone in the sense that I do have my husband here, but he's very ill. And so to be a caregiver in this situation, when you're a flaming extrovert like I am, is very bad on your mental health. And then to have people that you love inflicted with this nightmare adds another layer of stress and sadness and quite frankly, anger. And so I'm just going to be real blunt. I'm pissed. I'm pissed. And I will also say that I'm proud of all of the communicators that I know at the jobs that they've been doing. And I appreciate all of the work that everybody's been doing to keep things going. But we're not going back where we were. There's no going back. It's a forward march. And we need to go forward with a lot of common sense and patience and love. And I love you all, and I just want you to just stay healthy and take the advice from the doctors and the people that are on the ground floor, because that's where you're going to get the actual facts of how this is affecting people on a humanistic level. Love you guys. Thanks.
At the beginning of this, I read something that recommended that you should talk to somebody every day, phone call or whatever, to somebody, and keep up some kind of social contact. I talked to Ben a few times, partly for that reason, and also because I had some questions our shared client. But yeah, it's hard. I'm more fortunate. My wife and I are here together, and she's busy sewing cloth masks that we've given to the PT department at Methodist Hospital. We know them very well from 2 different knee issues. On the other hand, we live 4 blocks from our grandchildren, but we haven't been up close in person with them yet. Peyton, our daughter, brought them by for my birthday, and sat in the car and held out a sign and sang happy birthday to me. So that was actually really nice. But by and large, it's stuff. I haven't been out of the house except to go to the grocery 3 times in the last 3 weeks. And right now I'm told that I cannot leave the house and go to the grocery. I ride my bike once in a while. So I have the, we have a big vegetable garden going, and but it's tough. But you should talk to people. Maybe sessions like this are really, really important. Thank you for doing it. Also, Trisha's dog is the best part of it, though.
So, thank you. Couple things. One is, I don't know if I've shared that my grandson, my latest grandson, was born on March 9th. And we were at the hospital on the 9th and the 10th. And on the 11th, they decided that they weren't going to have visitors anymore. But I have counted that son, who lives really only 3 blocks from me, and his family, immediate family, as people I'm quarantined with, even though they're not in my house. And I've been over to see them once a week. And I am planning a virtual Easter. I normally host Easter. I'm going to cook a meal and kind of semi-prepare it and deliver bags to each house. My brother and both of my sons and a good friend that always comes for Easter. And then we're going to do a Zoom Easter dinner. Trying to do things that work. But back to the idea of this as a risk management exercise. I wanted to, I've got another image, but I'm not going to try and share it. But it's another image that's used in safety planning and risk management planning. It's called the bow tie. And the bow tie says, okay, here are the things that funnel into a problem, but here are the things that remediate out of it that you should have in place. And so I wanted to say, what are the things that you have learned through this experience so far that you are going to apply to be ready for the next crisis, even if it's not a pandemic crisis? But what are the things that you are taking away from this that you think are valuable lessons to apply in managing and expecting the crises in your life? And I'm just going to throw that out without adding anything about what I've done, because I don't know that I have. Other than I do want to have more cash on hand. I see Austin says, be agile. Eggs. I did a parking lot drug deal with Trish yesterday for a dozen eggs. Austin says, be agile in your communication strategy. Don't be afraid to adapt to the situation as needed. And I think that really applies. I went through Hurricane Harvey, and the thing I learned from that was being agile physically and able to kind of reset where I was physically. And I think this is about being agile both in how we manage our lives and in how we manage our work. One of my clients, Exterran, has used this opportunity, and I unfortunately wasn't the one to suggest it. I wish I could take credit for it. But their IT people decided that it was time to set up a social sharing site, like a Yammer kind of a site, which they had never been interested in before. And so my task is to try to figure out how to help them manage that process so it's successful and that it remains something that they do, and how do they apply that when everybody's back in the office.
We've been kind of working with a business coach for about 6 months now, and some of the things that he has said is, always make sure you have about at least 3 months or 90 days cash in the bank. Maybe you need more, but he said at least that much, which thankfully we did. And just, really, it's the scheduling, it's little things like, you know, getting a schedule, keeping to that schedule. He calls it a default calendar of things you're going to do every day, certain times. And then also just don't let up on your marketing. I mean, you know, you may never know when somebody needs additional help with something related to what you do. So, you know, whereas some people would pull back and go, oh, people are losing clients, I can't do anything. Now's the time to up your marketing game. I mean, we actually brought in a company to help us with some of our social media marketing, to do some stuff that we just had never really had time to do. And, you know, write more blogs and, you know, post on LinkedIn, just stuff that you can do that you just have kind of put aside, or, you know, I'm too busy, you know, to help myself because I've got these clients. Well, what if you don't have those clients? So keep up the marketing, keep it up. And like I said, set yourself a schedule. I'm going to, you know, do this, this, and this today. I'm going to, you know, insert work, walk the dogs, work out, you know, those pieces in there to make sure you're staying healthy. If you want to clean your desk off, schedule it in. So try and stick to that.
Good idea.